is that local antisocial behaviour turned into minor criminality, to cannabis smoking, to relationships with boys that were a lot older, and that she completely removed herself from the family environment.
When Dennehy was just 15 years old, she met 21-year-old John Treenor. He spent the next 10 years with her. Uniquely, he can describe in detail how a wild teenager turned into an adult psychopath. Together they raised a family, while she began her gradual descent into violence and crime. Ironically, it was her attraction to dogs that first brought them together.
He used to take the dog up to the park, and she'd come up to me asking if the dog bit, blah, 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 and I said no, and, you know, she was brilliant with the dog. She was funny, she was outgoing, she was confident, and she could charm the pants off a donkey if she wanted to, which she did, and I fell for it hook, line and sinker, if I'm honest.
Both were unemployed, and soon they turned to petty crime to make ends meet.
So we were living off, you know, what we could get, and basically that involved stealing from shops or whatever, just to eat. But I think she enjoyed it, and I didn't.
While Dennehy was getting wilder, John wanted to settle down and have a family. He believed she might change, but he had no idea he was living with a psychopath.
You know, we had a family, and she chose to completely go the opposite way and just bugger off and do what she wanted, and it didn't matter who she hurt, including me and the kids. There's no love in them pictures, there's no happiness. She couldn't deal with a crying kid. Like if she was screaming upstairs when she went to bed, she would bring her downstairs and put her outside and shut the door while she screamed. I hate looking at these pictures, you know. I really hate looking at them.
Dennehy was the mother of 2 daughters, the first born when she was 17, the second 6 years later. But she would still disappear for weeks and months and be in constant trouble. Dennehy was drinking heavily and began to cut herself.
The self-harming definitely started when the drinking got, like, really, really bad. I never saw it, but, you know, I'd see it on her arms gradually getting more and more.
We know that psychopathy is usually expressed differently in women than in men. A lot of women will turn their violent impulses inward in the form of self-harm or substance misuse. We know that in Joanna Dennehy, she started off like that. But soon she changed, and that violence was later projected outwards.
She come round one night, she knocked on the back door, both kids were in bed. I opened the back door and she had a needle straight through her arm, and it was still in there. I just pulled a knife out and just stubbed it in the floor and left it there. And we were just talking, and I can't to this day remember what we were talking about, but she did say, I wish I could just kill somebody.
It seems as if by her mid-20s, Joanna's psychopathic personality had reached its endpoint. She wanted to kill. Sentenced at the age of 30, she faces the rest of her life behind bars. But not all criminal psychopaths are serial killers or even murderers. Now 53 years old, Noel Razor Smith has 58 criminal convictions, including GBH and armed robbery. He has spent 30 years in prison. In 2010, he was released on license from a life sentence. One wrong move and he goes back into prison.
Well, today I've got to go and see my probation officer and report in, and hopefully go for a drink with my dad and my brother. It's been a long time, you know. It's been a very long time.
4 years on, and Noel has stayed out of trouble.
Nice to meet you.
Now he is on a mission to look inside his own mind. Because Noel fears he may be a psychopath.
I'd ride down to the end and then ride back and close my eyes before I got to the traffic lights and just go straight through the traffic lights. Wow. Just for the thrill of it.
Not all criminal psychopaths are serial killers or even murderers. But most of them are at least very violent. Noel Smith has spent over 30 years of his life in prison for armed robberies. Now out on license, he is desperate not to go back. But he needs to know if he's a psychopath, because if he were, he would be far more likely to re-offend and go back to jail. He'd need all the help he can get to stay straight. Noel's life of violence began in Brixton, South London, when he was just 15. Within a few years, he became a member of a gang and was involved in over 200 bank robberies.
Brixton High Street, back in the 80s, we robbed probably every bank along here. Nationwide, down to Halifax, the HSBC up there. We used to rob a bank in around about a minute and a half. So we'd be in, get the money, out and be gone before anybody really knew what was happening. It was all about the element of surprise. We would crash into a bank, I'd wave the gun around, throw out a few threats. I would basically tell people that if they didn't comply, they were going to get shot. Normally, I'd tell them they're going to get one in the foot or the knee, because people are more inclined to believe that than if you say you're going to blow their head off. So really, it was my job to frighten the customers and staff into compliance. And I was always pretty good at that. I had a really good growl, and I kind of looked the part, so people were willing to do what I said.
Through all the years of his extreme violence, just like Joanna Dennehy, Noel had little concern for his victims. So his personality must be rigorously assessed in order to find signs of psychopathy. Back in the 1940s, American doctor Hervey Cleckley had come up with a list of 21 key psychopathic traits. But for decades, there was no way of actually measuring the degree of a person's psychopathy, although it was clear some were more dangerous than others. Finally, a psychologist working with Canadian prisoners in the 1960s, Dr. Robert Hare, developed a psychopathy checklist. The score ranges from 0 to 40, and the higher you score, the more extreme your psychopathy.
The checklist is valuable because it's the first internationally validated tool that could be used anywhere in the world to measure degrees of psychopathy. But it can also be used then to predict what's going to happen to a prisoner when they're released from jail.
That tool is going to be used to assess Noel Smith, bank robber and lifelong criminal. He will be examined by one of the UK's leading forensic psychiatrists, Tony Maiden. Tony will probe Noel's personality. He's after evidence of traits like juvenile delinquency and thrill-seeking. Most importantly, he has to judge the strength of these traits. The higher Noel scores, the more dangerous he is. But first, Tony needs to study Noel's criminal and psychological history from the very beginning.
Can I start off with where you were born then?
I was born in Charing Cross in London.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve 1960. My parents were Irish immigrants, come from Dublin. My mother come from South Dublin, my father come from North Dublin.
Yeah. Was your dad ever in trouble for anything at all?
Mainly fighting.
Fighting?
Yeah. Yeah.
And where did you go to school?
South Hills, secondary one.
Right.
And ended up in about 20 fights in that 6 months, and that's when I started hating school, really.
Right.
Me and a mate of mine decided that, you know, we'd bunk school instead.
Did you get in any trouble when you were hanging around the streets?
The usual sort of stuff, you know. We'd done a little bit of petty shoplifting, sweets, and nicking milk off doorsteps and that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tony Maiden notes that Noel's antisocial behaviour started in his early teens, typical of most developing psychopaths.
And we'd nick mopeds and motorbikes.
And what's the attraction of the joyriding and motorbikes and stuff
It was
like
just a great thrill. I used to do things like get drunk. At this time, we discovered alcohol, and I'd get on a motorbike, 2 o'clock in the morning with no crash helmet on. And what I used to do was there was 2 sets of traffic lights, and I'd ride down to the end and then ride back. And close my eyes before I got to the traffic lights and just go straight through the traffic lights.
Wow.
Just for the thrill of